In this third film about trade barriers, we're going to look at the subsidy that is paid from the government to the producers. So we have the same starting situation as we had with the tariff and the import quota. So we'll have the domestic supply and the domestic demand, and we have a world market price. And since this is a very small country, the supply function from the world will be totally elastic. So therefore we'll have a domestic production that is equal to Q prod, and we'll have a consumption Q consumption. So the difference there will be the original import. We know that the government wants to produce increase the production inside this country up to Q production target, and we also know that this will give us marginal cost for the last produced units that is given by the supply function up here. So we know that we have to increase the price from P world up to P1 to cover that marginal cost, which we did with the tariff and with the quota. But in this case we're going to do a little bit differently. We're going to pay this difference as a subsidy to the producers. So the government will pay the difference between P1 and P world as a subsidy per produced unit. So when the producers receive this subsidy, they're going to end up with having a marginal cost that they are looking at that is much lower than we had originally, due to the case that the government is paying for the difference here, the marginal cost here for all of these produced units. And since the government can't tell that if this is the 1th or the 20th or the 12th or whatever unit, they have to pay the subsidy for every produced unit. So therefore we have a parallel shift of the supply function. This will give us these original areas that we had earlier. We will have A1 as increased producer surplus, due to the case that they are now receiving a higher revenue for these produced units that they produced originally, and we will have this A2, that's the increased revenue minus the production cost originally for the new produced units. And the government will pay the marginal cost for or the subsidy here, so that's P1 minus P world times the quantity that actually is produced, the Q prod target here. So they're gonna produce they're gonna pay for A1, A2 and this area B here. So this rectangle here is the governmental cost. Another way of looking at, which might be a little bit more correctly, is that we look at it as the change in subsidy when we actually have this change in production. So since the government is funding these production changes, the shift in supply function will be due case that this area A1 prim here is the increased producer surplus due to the case that we are producing the original one, but to, in this case, a lower cost. And A2 prim here will be the difference in producer surplus due to the case that we are selling to P world, and we have reduced the cost of the government has reduced our production costs. And therefore the governmental cost will be this downward shift of the supply function like that. So the government has to pay A1 plus A2 plus A1 prim plus A2 prim plus B. And as we can see here, since we don't have any changes in the world prices, we are just affecting the supply function. The consumers will not be affected directly on this market. They will still pay the world market price, and therefore they will still consume the same amount as originally. Okay, let's take the example we had earlier with the supply and demand function. So we know that the world market price is 200, we are producing 200 and we're consuming 1,000 originally. The government wants to increase the production up to 300, so we have to give a subsidy of 100 money per produced unit, like that. So we know that the marginal cost for the last produced one is 300. So we shift downwards the supply function with 100 units of money. So we'll see here that the subsidized supply function will be competitive up to the world market price of 200, and there that will give us a production of 300. And since we don't have any affection of the market price, the consumers are still paying 200 per unit, and therefore we're going to consume 1,000 units. So if we look at that, we see here that A1 or A1 prim, they are the same areas, same values. A2 and A2 prim are the same areas, and B is exactly the same, whichever of the calculations we use. So when we calculate this one, we see that A1 prim is that area, A2 prim is the blue dotted one, like that. So we see the changes in consumer surplus will be 0 due to the case that they are not affected. The change in producer surplus will be positive A1 and A2, that's 25,000. And governmental costs for subsidies will be A1, A2 and B, that's 30,000. And therefore we see that the net society loss will be the B area, that is the deadweight loss in this case is just 5,000. So this is the least costly one if you look at society, the social cost. But in many international agreements this is forbidden to do it like this. This is a way of affecting the competition and the international trade that is mostly often forbidden in international agreements. So it's not that common that we actually see this, not officially anyhow.